Now recording. So, how the heck are ya? How is it going on this Friday morning?
Tired.
Yeah, I feel that. At the moment, at home, I've got two little ones who are both teething at the same time. So, yeah, I didn't get a huge amount of sleep last night. But, you know, I've got my stimulant. So, there you go. Don't worry, it's just caffeine. So, on the agenda today, we're going to talk about the Hexam. We're going to talk about assignment 4, and we're going to finish up the course material. We are going to cover the last thing that needs to be covered this semester, today. So, you may be wondering then, this is a little early to be finishing the course, is it not? Yeah, a little bit. I feel like there could be a little bit more in this course. You know, maybe when I'm finished with the monumental task of completely revising server side, I will turn my attention to this course and its problems. But you know, I can't do it just like on the fly, you know. So, one might ask oneself, well, if we're finishing the course material today, is there any purpose in me showing up for the next 2 weeks? And the answer is, why yes, yes there is. Because even though we have covered all of the material, I will still have fun activities planned. Next week we're going to make macaroni art, guys. No. We're going to have something even better than macaroni art. We're going to do a review session. So next week, my plan for the class is to do a big fat review session, take the entire class, go over pretty much everything. The week after that, we're going to do that mock test that I've been promising all semester. So the state of the test, or the state of, like, this test that I'm speaking of, essentially, this is what I did, this is what I'm in the process of doing, this is how it's being compiled, right? This week I've been setting the exam. I've been writing all of the exam questions. I have pretty much all of the exam questions decided on at this point. And I'd say the text of the questions themselves is like 80% of the way there, and I'm really just dealing with like formatting from, you know, finishing some off and dealing with formatting for the rest of it. I should be, well, you know, I should be printing them next week, absolutely. Not that you care about stuff like that, but you know, maybe you find it interesting. So basically this is what I did. When I wrote the questions for the exam, I wrote more questions than I needed by about 50%. I have taken all of those questions, which they're not reject exam questions, they're all good questions. If there were any bad questions, I just threw them out completely. But basically, the mock test is going to be produced from questions which I wrote for the exam, but ended up not fitting into the exam, if that makes sense. I made a decision about what to put where, right? And that's where the test questions have come from. So the test questions, the mock test questions, will be representative of the scope of the course which is being covered, the breadth of the questions that you will be asked, the style of the questions that I will ask you. All right? In all of those categories, it's representative. I am designing this mock test to take somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half. So it's about half of the length of the exam. Right? My plan for the final week, we will write that test in the first half of our class, our regularly scheduled class. And then for the second half, you'll swap papers with the person next to you, and we will go through and you will grade your tests. I will go through the solutions and also give you some insight into how they should be graded. And hopefully that is informative for you folks, setting some expectations for the final exam. Does that sound like a good plan? So, review, mock test, final exam. Sound good? Excellent. So, I should talk then at length about the final exam itself, since, we're getting into exam mode, So, a few basics. Number one, the exam, both the mock test and the final exam, will be written pencil/pen and paper tests. They will not be written on computers. They will be on a piece of paper in front of you. All right? So that's number one. Number two, I've decided that you should bring a calculator. So just bring calculators. Don't worry, I'm gonna post an announcement about this. So essentially, one or two of the exam questions may or may not require you to perform some basic arithmetic. So calculators, because personally, I'm not sure that you should need a calculator to do the math that's on the test, but people like to have calculators if they're ever called to perform any mathematical operation whatsoever. So we shall have calculators as a permitted aid. Okay, sound good? So I do have the time for the exam. I've been holding off on publishing it until I kind of get a feel for how many invigilators I'm going to get, because I want to, when I announce it, I want to say what room each section is going to be writing in as well, right? So that all of the information is released at once. But I'll tell you, for the benefit of the people who come to class and watch the video, it's going to be Thursday in exam week at 4:30 in the afternoon. So right over dinner. Incidentally, I absolutely do not mind at all if you bring a sandwich to an exam, as long as you don't write any answers in the mustard. Okay? So, any questions so far? Okay. So, another discussion that we need to have is on the subject of memory aid. So, a lot of you probably sort of know by reputation the exam for this course, right? If you've been talking to any of the upper semester students, you'll probably hear a lot of stories about how it's awful and just terrible and designed to destroy you. So I would like to just say, right, that is the exam that we are decidedly not writing this time around, all right? Fresh exam, all new questions. I am not reusing any questions from any previous semesters. They are all strictly pulled from my brain for your benefit this very semester. So basically, you know, one of the problems with that former exam that has been run in previous semesters, first, it was an online test, you going through Canvas quizzes, and number two, it permitted W3 schools as a whitelisted site in the lockdown browser. Although the search function didn't work because that requires Google, if I recall correctly. So basically, the former exam was treated as an open book test, right? Now, I understand that, you know, this is only your second semester. Have you guys written many open book exams so far? Yeah? They're a bit of a trap, aren't they? You know? Generally speaking, when a professor is designing a test and it's open book, the professor is sort of, we unfortunately imagine things like, oh, they have all of the stuff. I can ask more complicated questions now. Which is generally how it goes, right? In this case, we are not writing an open book exam. It is going to be a closed book exam. However, I am going to permit one of two different memory aids depending on what, like basically I've been asking my classes this week which of the two of these schemes you prefer, and I'm using that to guide which scheme I'm going to go with for the final exam. So, let the will of the people be the will of the people, and I will decide what I want to do anyways. So, one of two things is going to happen. Either I am going to draw up a sheet of syntax reference for the exam, which basically means I go through our course material and compile a list of commonly used and maybe even some uncommonly used functions, right? Function reference for your enjoyment on the exam. The other option is for each of you to be responsible for producing your own crib sheet / cheat sheet. So that is defined as one 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, front and back. You can put anything you like on it, absolutely anything you like, all right, except Post-it notes, right? You can't. It's like that thing where, like, you know, you can't go to the genie and wish for more wishes. You can't attach a bunch of extra paper to your, just you can't, like, this is my cheat sheet. It's a book, but it's all sticky notes. Yes.
Multicolored ink and polarized lenses.
Actually, if you want to set that up, I'm actually I'm cool with that. The restriction is on the paper, not on the ink.
Okay.
That's clever though. Yeah. So essentially, that's like. I'm going to put this to a vote, but I'd like to bias the results a little bit by explaining a little bit about both of these methods before, you know, you folks make the decisions one way or the other. Although it would be interesting. At the moment, who is inclined towards a professor-made syntax reference sheet? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. How many people are inclined towards making your own cheat sheet? 1. And a bunch of people, 2 people, and a bunch of people are reserving judgment. Yeah. Abstaining? Yeah.
I meant to vote for the first one.
Oh, you meant, okay. All right. So it's very interesting. I don't want to. Well, maybe I do, but what's happened in the last 2 classes is, like, initially that's been like the initial vote, but after I explain what a cheat sheet is, like, people the last 2 classes have flipped their opinions. So let's see if that happens here as well. Maybe you guys could be the ones to hold out, but just so stubborn, you know? Stubbornness can be a virtue. So, it is my recommendation, even if it is eventually decided that you will have a professor-made bona fide syntax reference sheet for the final exam, I still recommend making the cheat sheet yourself, as that is the best studying you're going to do for the exam. I recommend you make one of these for every exam you're writing this semester and in all future semesters, because, again, it's the best studying you're going to do in this exam period. All right? So this is what you do to make a cheat sheet. All right? You go through the material, you pick out the important points, you summarize them, you pick out the important pieces of code, and you put those on too. Right? The idea is the information is gathered into your brain, processed, and then smaller pieces of information, more concentrated, refined pieces of information, make it onto your cheat sheet, stuff that would remind you about the rest of the material even, right? This is ideally how a cheat sheet is used. I have had, I've run the cheat sheet policy quite a bit in the past. When I was at the university, I would do it all the time, actually. And there was this one guy, okay? Literally took every slide in the whole course, printed them out at postage stamp size, filled both sides, managed to get pretty much every slide on that cheat sheet. I think he threw away like title slides and table of contents stuff, and it was a little selective, right? But in general, every slide in the course. Guess what? Still failed the class, right? Because, first of all, if you have to get a magnifying glass out, you're probably doing it wrong, right? Not to discourage you to attempt your polarized lenses solution, but you're kind of getting towards this same problem with that. The problem is not having the information in front of you. The problem is finding the information on your cheat sheet, right? What you should do, ideally, take the thing, divide it into sections, make them clear boundaries, right? Make a box for a topic, have nice, clear titles inside of those boxes so that you can easily find the information on your cheat sheet, right? This is you should do this first, and when you're doing things like doing practice problems, use your cheat sheet as the only aid, right? Because it's going to force recall. That's the problem that a lot of people have with this course and others is, you kind of have this interesting phenomenon where information travels in through the eyes and out through the fingers, but never comes to rest inside of the brain, right? It's actually not useful to be merely a conduit for the internet, right? If all you are is a conduit for the internet as a programmer, the internet is increasingly able to do that for itself, right? You're not really needed in the economy if that's all you can do, right? So, in general, it's necessary to know things, which means at some point the information must come to rest in your brain at least for the end of a semester, to be able to, long enough to write an exam, right? So, yeah. The cheat sheet, like summarizing information, is an extremely effective study tool. That's what I use when I'm trying to put a course together, right? Because like when I'm putting a course together, I am studying the material, and then basically what the course is the product of my having studied the base material, right? That's how a course gets put together. And let me tell you, summarizing, very effective, right? So, another thing that I would recommend against, you know, if it were the decision that we will do cheat sheets instead of a syntax reference sheet, do not go to the secret Discord that the professors totally don't know about, and do not go to the secret Discord that the professors definitely do not infiltrate. Don't go there and take a look and see, oh, you know, this guy posted his cheat sheet. Now it's mine. Print off, take to exam. Do not do that, because you are allowing this person to rob you of the best opportunity you will have this semester to study for the exam. And basically, all you're doing by doing that is reproducing this same process where information travels in through the eyes and out through the fingers without ever coming to rest in the brain, right? And honestly, the only reason people do that in the first place is to please their own egos. So, you know, all you're doing by using somebody else's cheat sheet is pleasing their ego and costing yourself the best studying that you'll do this semester, right? So, make your own cheat sheets, right? And again, I recommend doing this for every course, whether or not you're allowed it on the exam. Does that make sense? So that's what I would say. Another thing I would say about the syntax reference sheet versus the cheat sheet is when I make a syntax reference sheet, it is exactly and precisely that. It is a bunch of functions and how to use them. I'm not going to put conceptual material on a syntax reference sheet, right? I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to tell you about any topic, I'm not going to explain anything on a syntax reference sheet. It's just going to be syntax reference. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
Are we allowed to use our, whether it be a cheat sheet or a syntax sheet, are we allowed to use that on the mock exam as well?
Yes. In fact, that is my strong recommendation. My strong recommendation, if we decide to go with the crib sheet, make that before the mock test, because that is your chance to test it in a live test scenario. I should say, I don't think I've actually said this, but the mock test is not worth any grades, right? It can't be, unfortunately, I don't have the power to compel the grade structure this semester into accepting it as being worth points. So it's not worth any grades, it's very low stakes. That being said, we will do it under simulated testing conditions, right? Which means that it'll still be bags at the front, no cell phones, right? Maybe I will randomize the seating, maybe I won't. But if I hear any whispering, I will kick people out. It's a mock test, but we're still taking it seriously, all right? If there are any cheaters, out the door with you, all right? I don't see why anybody would cheat, because it's not even worth marks, right? The incentive for cheating just isn't there, but you never know. There are a few jokers in every class, So, yes.
So when's it decided that the sheet we're going to use and which one are we going to?
I'm basically going to send an announcement today, because you guys need some time to prepare it if we're going with the crib sheet, right? I wanted to give all three of my sections the opportunity to have some input and not just like base all of my decision making on like what the Tuesday group thinks.
So is it combined though with all of the classes, or?
Yeah. Although, to be honest, I'm not really remembering numbers so much as, you know, this class was in favor of this, that class was in favor of that. Do you feel you have enough information to put in your final vote? Yeah? Alright. So, how many people would like the syntax reference sheet? How many people want the crib sheet? Unsurprisingly, this is also how the other two sections voted. So, alright, I'll just call it. Question before I make my pronouncement?
Or single-sided?
Double-sided, of course. Yeah, I'm not, to do single-sided, I would have to like be patrolling through the room, you know, flipping people's papers over. Ah! It's like, you brought in a thing that had things on both sides. It's like, but sir, I was using that for scrap work. It's like, I don't want to have that conversation during the exam. Put stuff on both sides. It's yours. The full however many square centimeters, both sides, do with it as you please. So given that all three sections have been actually strongly in favor of doing the crib sheet, it's interesting. It seems like mostly the people who voted the other way are like anxious people who like are anxious about what's even going to be on the test, you know. But part of the purpose of our discussion this morning is to tell you what my expectations are for what I expect you to study. So, and also next week, that's also what the purpose of next week is. So, so yeah, here I am, here it is, I'll stand up properly. All right. Be it decreed hereby and forthwith that on the final exam you shall be permitted 1 crib sheet, 1 standard piece of 8.5 by 11 or A4 printer paper. Although if you want lined paper, that's also fine. So long as it's still of a standard size. We shall do the crib sheet. You can start working on those immediately. Yes, please have that finished in time for the mock test in the final week, because again, that is the best opportunity you will have for like you don't usually get the chance to like try the thing out in practice and then revise it for the final, right? So, all right. Just splashed my hands with tea. That's okay. Any questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
That one test that you said all the previous years have found horrible. Is there any chance we could get access as practice or no?
Unfortunately, I do not have permission to. I don't have permission to release that. Basically. Sorry. And besides, like, I'll dig around and see if I can't find some additional review questions, but I can't release the previous exam. Yeah. So, people normally find it useful for me to talk about the exam itself. So I will now talk about the exam itself. I shall try to put your minds at ease. I know that's kind of, you know, a bit of a Sisyphean task, you know, trying to push the rock up the hill. But a very, very important thing that everybody needs to know about the exam is that you are required to pass the exam to pass the course. I know that I have stated this policy at several points throughout the semester, but it bears repeating, especially because last semester I was running a course with a similar policy, and someone actually launched a formal grade appeal on the basis that I hadn't said enough in class that the final was like, you gotta pass it, which was funny because it was recorded, so I just, here's the clip where I said it, day one, like 10 minutes into the first day, but anyway, so you have to pass the final to pass the class. The final is worth 25% of the grade, assuming you've passed it, right? If you haven't passed it, then the maximum grade you will get in this class is a 45%. So I would like to justify that policy, explain to you why it's in place. But, I've already touched on this point a few times today already. It comes down to this problem again of the information entering through the eyes, leaving through the fingers, and never having come to rest in the brain. There will be people who, on this final exam that we are going to write in a few short weeks, they will have gotten like 90-95% on their assignments and then bomb the exam to the tune of like 5 to 10%. That is going to happen. I normally see 2 or 3 of those per section. Alright? So the question then becomes, how is that possible? Well, some of it will be academic integrity violations that I can't catch. Unfortunately, I can't catch every violation. I only have so much time, and the tools I have available to me are, not perfect, right? And I include in that my own brain. So unfortunately, it's the case that not every case of academic integrity can be caught. Generally speaking, you can cheat your way through the assignments, but if you get to the exam and you don't know anything, you still will not pass the course. But that being said, even if the manner in which you're completing the assignments does not rise to the level of academic integrity violation, it is still well possible to complete pretty much every assignment in this course by the overuse, heavy use of online tutorials, YouTube tutorial videos, and of course the accursed chatbot. This has been a problem which well predates the existence of the infernal chatbot. This policy has been in place for many years to address this problem which exists because of, here's the problem, right? JavaScript is the most used programming language. Every single thing that you would want to do with JavaScript, there's an online tutorial for it, right? Every single small thing that you would want to do with JavaScript. This is why the chatbot is effective at it as well, right? So if all you've been doing is going through online tutorials and cobbling together your solutions, they will work, but it doesn't mean that you know JavaScript. Being able to pass the test means that you know JavaScript, right? So this test is intended to filter out the people who have not been participating in the course, right? Because it is my view, and I believe a great deal of the professors in the department share this view, if all you're doing is piecing your assignments together from, the chatbot and your your YouTube videos and that sort of thing. What that is failure to engage in the course, right? It's actually kind of annoying when like I get solutions to assignments that include a whole bunch of code that's like stuff that we never came close to touching in class, and includes a lot of advanced stuff that you got. I know for a fact that like the person who submitted me this code doesn't understand it, right? Happens all the time, right? This exam policy is intended for people like that, right? It's like, in general, I'm kind of preaching to the choir, because the people who come to class are generally the people engaging in the class, right? And I will say that this section has a higher average attendance, for whatever reason, than my other two sections. Let's see how we go. Okay, so in this class we've got like about half the number of people who should be here. That's pretty good, actually. The Thursday class that I had yesterday, 1/3, right? And that's like in the middle. Like that's like starts at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, like I don't know. I don't know. It's also like apparently there's this effect with like course registration numbers where like if you have the higher course registration number, in general, the people who sign up for a course early tend to end up in sections with higher course registration numbers. And because they're the sorts of people who don't procrastinate on things like signing up for courses, they don't procrastinate on doing assignments either. They tend to be better students overall and come to class. There's this interesting secondary phenomenon related to the course numbers, which, I don't know, maybe this is like the section with the lowest course number, I'm not sure, but this is apparently an observed phenomenon. Like, when I talk about like general trends like this, I'm not talking about any particular student. These are like population-wide effects, right? But yeah, so maybe that's the effect here, is like you folks are just the early registrants, right? But yeah, the other two classes are like, oh man, like the numbers are even worse in the Tuesday evening section, because it's an evening section. It starts at like 5, you know? So, you know, yeah, the people who come to class and engage honestly with the material and attempt the assignments, like I don't, like it's not inherently bad to seek assistance when you're having trouble when you're doing a coding project, right? The question is, how high is your threshold for trying to do it yourself before you go and seek outside help, right? How long, like, is it, oh man, I typed this up, I have one compiler error, better go to the internet, right? You should at least read the errors that the compiler gives you before you attempt to Google them, right? Try to understand what you're doing. But generally speaking, like I'm probably talking to the people who are generally not the problem in this respect. This is, you know, even the people watching, you know, my home television audience, you're probably not the problem either because you're watching the video, you know? Like, it's interesting, right? Over the course of a semester, you have like a roughly exponential decay in attendance, right? You have a bit of a bump after reading week, but like it very quickly normalizes to its previous decay. Interestingly, this also happens on the views on the YouTube channel. So it's not that people are like not coming to class and are instead watching the YouTube videos. People are actually not doing either of those things, right? And that's a problem, right? Like, there's still time. There's still time to watch the videos. If you're watching this, go back and watch the other videos. You still have time, but you won't have time in a couple of weeks. So yeah, in general, come to class, right? If you come to class, you are engaging with the material, you're trying the stuff out that we're trying in class, right? The information is entering your eyes and coming to rest in the brain, right? You know, that being said, I'm expecting, like, and you know, I really hope to be proven wrong, but based on past experience, I expect probably 40% of the class is going to fail the exam. And it's not going to be like, where are the 2/3 of the people who aren't coming to class? Like that's generally who fails classes, is people who don't engage in the class, right? Like, you know, the trite expression, you know, if you want to pass, come to class, you know, that's true. But I also like to say to students that the absolute best preparation for the exam is the course, right? Like if you've been doing the course this whole time, and you haven't been like letting it slide on the basis of, oh, it's okay, I'll cram it at the end, right? Those are the people who are gonna do well on the exam, right? Cramming works a little bit, but it's not effective. And, you know, by the time you get to server side, if you've crammed everything you understand about this course, you're gonna forget it over the summer. Then we'll be right back to square one with server side, and I'm gonna have to explain what client and server mean to you again, right? So, I kind of always have to do that anyway, though. I mean, it's actually, you know what? Like, if the title of the class is server-side programming, the very first thing you should do in that class is define what a server is. You should start with definitions, but anyway. So, understand that I have not designed the exam to catch you. I have not designed it to be, like, I am aware that it is a paper test. I am aware that it's not open book, right? The question, like, I was aware of the structure of the test when I wrote the questions, right? Now, a thing that people have really loved me doing is comparing, like, the test to the Java test, or the Java tests that you've seen. So, here's my approach to test questions, right? Well, first of all, we're a little bit helped with this because JavaScript is, in general, a less verbose language than Java, right? Like in Java, they can ask you to write a fairly simple class and it's like a page and a half, right? So like, the Java test is just like, it's almost also a test of how is your writer's cramp endurance, you know? I try not to do that on mine. My approach to a test is like, I like it to be laser focused on what is the particular thing I want to see if you know, right? I'm not trying to fill time, right? For me, it's like, I'm not trying to use whether or not you can finish the test as an indication of your ability to do the work. I'm trying to use, do you understand the concepts, right? Which means, like, my coding questions tend to be shorter than the Java test, but that doesn't mean that they're easier, right? They're testing particular things, right? Now, you know, the Java test tests particular things too. It's just, you know, it'll take, 60, 70 lines of code to do so. The coding questions I usually set, I try to keep them under 20, 25 lines of code for the longer ones. Basically, I do short coding questions and longer coding questions. The long ones are normally 20, 25 lines of code around roundabouts for a standard solution. And then a short coding question will be anywhere from, 5 to 15, depending, right? One thing that I'm going to try experimenting with this semester. Sometimes people find this helpful. Sometimes people find this like intimidating. But the number of lines of code for the instructor's solutions for coding questions, like printed on the exam. It's like, here's the question. The standard solution, my standard solution is, say, 22 lines of code. I'm going to try this on the mock exam, and if people hate it, like absolutely hate it, I'm going to take it off for the exam. But like the idea is, like, you can kind of use that to gauge, like, am I writing way more than I need to? You know? Have I missed something important? You know? It kind of gives you like a bit of a ballpark figure, you know? Now obviously, I'm not going to expect anybody, like the number of lines of code in your solution is not factored into the grading scheme, right? You can write as much or as little as you want, it's just information about like my solution, right? And I've actually, on this one I've actually said, you know, here's what I consider a standard solution, and then here's a compact solution. And like there's this one question, I won't tell you anything else about the question, but there's this one question where like, the standard solution is like, I think 13 lines of code, but the compact solution is 3. So, and that kind of tells you how much information there is in the question, you know? But I don't know. I'm still experimenting on you folks. You guys are my guinea pigs. So yeah, so that's kind of how it's going to go. So I've talked about kind of the coding end. Any questions about that?
Really? You said you hadn't like finished the entire exam yet, right? But will we know like by next week kind of like the structure of kind of the point system, or like there's certain ways divided sections?
So there is a point system. You will be graded 4 marks. I will tally the marks, and that will be your grade on the test. With respect to like what the ratio is between coding and short answer questions, this is not something I typically divulge before the test. All I will say is both sections will be chunky enough that you can't skip either of them, right? But like, be able to do both. 2 other questions that I never answer about a test are how many questions are there and how many points is it worth, right? These are actually not relevant metrics. These metrics are not relevant to difficulty, right? They are not even relevant to the length of the test, right? I could write a test that had 100 questions, but it would be a short test, right? I could write a test that had 2 questions, and it could be a 5-hour test, right? It's not relevant, right? And people just get like so like fixated on the number of questions that like, it's like, fixate on the material, right? Not on the number of questions. It's not relevant to the difficulty. You're not going to know the difficulty of the exam before you get into the room. Although, you know, because we're doing the mock test, you'll have seen what an exam of half the length with different questions feels like. So I hope that you can see my perspective on that. Man, people get mad though when you only put like 2 questions on a test. University people particularly, man. It's like, you know, but like it's so fun because like if you do like a nice meaty question, you know, you really learn whether people can handle themselves, you know? Oh man. And now I'm just like nostalgically reminiscing about past test questions I've set. Okay, there was this one, it was really cool. I really, really liked this question. I would never set something like this here because it's like kind of, it's just generally not relevant to JavaScript or like anything I've taught at this institution so far. But imagine, all right, you have a grid. It's a grid full of numbers, random numbers between like 1 and 5, or 1 and 6, or something like, so 1 through 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, etc. Right? You have, like 1 means go left, 2 means go right, right? The function takes the grid and one cell in the grid as the start point. And like 5 would be stop. You also stop if you're about to go out of bounds. Starting in one cell in the grid, write me a function which finds the stopping point in the grid. Like, you know, it's like left, left, down, over here, down, stop. Right? I like that question. I thought it was cool. They hated it though. But I don't know why, because like, if you break that down, it's just kind of a switch statement inside of a loop, you know? But yeah, I like that one. I think I called it like Professor Confuzzlement's random walk or something like that. But anyway, that's kind of like more of, like, if I were teaching an algorithms class, I might be inclined to give you something like that. But don't worry, everything in our exam is going to focus on the JavaScript that we covered this semester. So basically, if you're wondering what the base material is, what is your raw material for studying, it is the module documents, all right? Everything will flow from the module documents, okay? Where practice exercises have been published and where example code has been published, that's also worth taking a look at. All right? So study the material on Canvas. Okay? And please, 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 don't take the module documents, give it to the infernal chatbot, and ask it to summarize it for you. Because then you are also robbing yourself of the opportunity to actually study. That's not studying. That's getting a robot to study for you. It's not the same thing. All right, sound good? Shall I talk briefly about the short answer questions then? Set some expectations.
That'd be great.
So, don't expect any multiple choice. When I do multiple choice, it's like the whole test is multiple choice, right? Because like, I will have like designed the thing to be like graded by one of the, you'll get a Scantron bubble sheet type thing if it's multiple choice. That being said, I do like to give a bit of a variety of question types. I like matching questions, I like ordering questions, I like fill-in-the-blank questions occasionally, not too many of them. I look at fill-in-the-blank questions a little bit like candy. It's nice to have a few, but you know, too much and it's too much, you know. Short answer questions for me, like written short answer, I will never expect a student to write more than 2 or 3 sentences for a question. And this is mainly because I hate reading. Well, I hate reading, like, I cannot stand tests that give you a written question and expect you to fill half a page. I cannot stand that. It takes forever to grade, and like, if you know the answer in 3 sentences, right? It's so excruciating watching a student like fumble for like 7 or 8 sentences to come to half of the solution. It's just, not to mention, most of the time it's marginal whether you can even read the chicken scratch, right? When I expect you to answer a question in multiple parts, the question itself will have multiple parts and you will have multiple spaces to answer things, right? I don't do the thing where you you write the question, throw everything together and give you half a page to do it. That's not me, okay? Everything will be like that much, all right? Okay? I hate essay questions. I'm not gonna ask essay questions. I'm a programmer, gosh darn it. I went into programming so I didn't have to read. But yeah, you can't expect like sentence, I ask you, you respond in a sentence type questions. That's totally fair game. Those are, I kind of view those as being like the bread and the butter. You know, those are the meat and potatoes of the short answer section, you know. So yeah, that's roughly what the short answer is going to be structured as. In terms of content, you can expect like a mix of like little tiny short code snippet type questions and concept questions, like theoretical questions. Does that make sense? Any questions about the exam, aside from the exam questions?
We still don't know when it is.
What the exam?
The date.
Oh! Thursday of exam week at 4:30. It's going to be in the second floor of C Wing, which is kind of an interesting place if you've never been there. It's like the Justice Studies department, so there's like this like room for self-defense in the back of it. So like if you really have a bad exam, they have some dummies that you can beat up afterwards. There's like a mock courtroom up there too. It's a very interesting wing of the college. But yeah, so it's the exam is going to be held on the second floor of C Wing. I will publish the rooms. Basically, I've got one big room and one small room. One of the 4 sections is going to have to write in the small room, and I haven't decided which one yet because I'm waiting to see back about how many invigilators they're going to give me. But yeah, Thursday at 4:30. You guys have another exam that day, I think. What is it?
So if there's 2 sections for the exam, or is it that's what you revealed to us of the short answer and coding?
Oh, yeah, no, there isn't a secret third hidden section.
Okay.
So on the Java exam, they kind of consider like the C section to be like debugging, I guess. I consider that to be a short answer territory, so like I also reserve the right to give you debugging questions, but they'll be short answer questions. Yeah, I generally do like a dual part structure. Coding and not coding, basically. Any other questions? None at all? Well, if you think of anything between now and Thursday in a couple of weeks, let me know. Good. Well, I suppose if we have nothing further to say about the exam, which I think, good gravy, we've talked about it for like an hour, so hopefully everybody has their expectations reasonably set. All right. How's everybody feeling about the exam? How many people are feeling, yeah, this is okay? How many people are thinking, sounds a little tough? How many people are thinking, I am certainly failing this class? Good! My hope is that you will come out of the exam saying, that was firm but fair and not as bad as I expected. That is my hope. We'll see. we'll see if that actually comes to pass. So, we need to discuss the final assignment. The final assignment. So, assignment 5, the TLDR, you're going to write 3 buttons. Each one triggers an AJAX request. One of those is just a hello world. The other 2 gather some JSON data from a PHP script on CS Unix, and then you take that data and integrate it into the web page in one of 2 different ways. And that is the assignment. Okay? So, let's go through it. Practice response. So, the goals of the assignment are, you're going to do events and DOM manipulation as you have been doing for some time now. Retrieving data from remote systems using AJAX. Processing JSON encoded data to retrieved from a remote system and displaying it using JavaScript and DOM manipulation. So, for the required AJAX calls, that should be plural, underlined, bolded, and italicized, the use of jQuery or XML HTTP request objects is strictly forbidden. Alright? Please, when you're writing your AJAX queries, do them in the method that we have discussed in class. Okay? Use the fetch method. If you have gone to an exterior outside source, I will know when I look at your fetch requests, because there'll be a bunch of junk in there that we didn't cover in class. Some of that junk is often useful, actually, but you know, I will know. It's plain as the nose on someone's face when they got their fetch request from somewhere else. So, submit to both CS Unix and Canvas. Hopefully everybody has their CS Unix login credentials sorted out by now. I say that knowing for a fact that is not the case. So, content. Ignore these 3 paragraphs, that's just Steve waffling. Your real requirements start on paragraph 4. Create a page with 3 buttons labeled first, second, and third. You will need an input element as well. You are at liberty to decide what input element to use for this, but if you'd like my personal recommendation, I would say radio box. Radio buttons are a great idea on this particular one, because it saves me typing. So, when any of these 3 requests are sent, you will send, basically the target of these 3 AJAX requests is this file. I know it's not A6, but it's A5. Just go with it. Rename your files, Steve, come on. You're targeting this URL, you're targeting this PHP script. All 3 of your AJAX calls will be sent to that PHP script. Okay? The PHP script returns different things depending on what you send it. If you send it no parameters, it will send you a hello world-esque statement. If you send it a get parameter, as specified in the document, it will send you basically maximum of 3 entries from a database of a nature we will be shortly exploring. If you send it the same parameter but as post rather than as get, it will send you between 1 and 15 records from the same database. That's how you can tell if you've done it correctly. I will say to you right now, most of the grades people miss out on this assignment are because they haven't sent the post request correctly and the server picks it up as a get request instead. I will show you how to not do that. Okay? Sound good? So, one thing that is a little bit tricky about this assignment, the PHP script which is being targeted is on CS Unix. You must, therefore, debug and test this code on CS Unix. The PHP script itself is not being distributed, right? You are to use this one particularly. So basically, if you write your assignment and you open it in local mode, it's not going to have the correct permissions to actually communicate with CS Unix. You must put your code up on the server, test it live on the server to see if it communicates with that PHP script. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. And because it's on the server, even XAMPP, which is something else I'm going to talk about today, even XAMPP won't help you that much, right? Now you may be saying to yourself, but hey, I want to work on this over the weekend. What gives? You can actually get a fair distance with this thing by saving yourself some JSON data that is produced from this script right here, right now. Just grab the data, save it to a file, throw it in your JavaScript that you're working on as a variable, and that can allow you to parse the JSON correctly, put the data into the web page correctly, because honestly, probably about 70% of this assignment is just taking JSON data and stuffing it into HTML. In terms of the actual amount of time and effort of accomplishing this task. The AJAX will take you between 30% and 5% of your time, depending on whether it's you get it right the first time or you have some errors, right? So, we can actually visit this. You can visit this link just in a regular browser. Come on. Copy. There we go. So you see, if I have not sent any parameters, it gives me this statement, which is the hello world, with a slightly out of date date. Sometimes I think he puts the year of publication all over things just to annoy people. Steve does. He's kind of like that. He's a little bit pugnacious. It's I can hear him in my brain. He's like, well, then update it. It's update the assignment. I'm yeah, okay, Steve. So if you provide a query parameter, this simulates a GET request. And you can see that we've got some JSON data that's come in. If you perform multiple requests, you can see that you get multiple, you get basically random data out of a database, maximum of 3 entries, 1, 2, 3. Although it's quite poorly formatted, if you copy this string fix the slashes, then you can use this string to write your code to do the JSON parsing, right? You can do that this weekend even if you have difficulty connecting to CS Unix. Okay? So, let's discuss how this information is then parsed. Basically, this is what the website's going to look like. Button 2 does this bit. Button 3 does this table. So, essentially, each record is comprised of 3 pieces of data. You have series, name, and link. I know this is Nintendo, it's not that link. It's the other type of link. So basically, if you take this link and you feed it in as the source attribute of if you feed it in as a source attribute for this, for an image, then it will pull this image from Nintendo's website and throw it in. If you, and that's basically all you have to do, as well as make sure that, like, unlike this, like the assignment requirement is actually these things should be like evenly divided and proportional, despite the fact that this is not the case in the example. And also the name goes here and the series goes there. Make sense? So far, so good? So the purpose of the input field is to send either the value Mario to get amiibos, or Star Wars, which will get you a bunch of images from a Star Wars phone game, collectible card game, I think, or something that literally only Steve Adams plays. He's the only person in the universe who plays it. And like, if you take a look at, like, I don't know what degree of familiarity you guys have with Star Wars, but like, there's like a whole extended universe thing with Star Wars that no longer exists because Disney killed it.
Yeah.
And like, there are a lot of strange people in that extended universe, and that game is like when you look through the images, you'll be like, this is a Star Wars character? You know? Like, I have never heard of this person. In fact, I can demonstrate that for you right now. Like, who is Echo? Probably a droid, right? There you go. Like, I'm not sure who Mother Talzin is, but apparently this is some person that has been in Star Wars at some point. But anyway, the data is formatted the same way, so you don't have to write a different version for the amiibos versus the Star Wars. The same code will apply to both instances. All right. However, the value of this parameter that gets sent is set by that input box, or that input, whatever the input type is. Again, I recommend the radio buttons. Make sense? Because like, it's like you only have one of two choices, right? So radio buttons make sense. Like, I want it to be radio buttons not just so I don't have to type Star Wars like 100 times. It's also because it is actually like good design to use that type of input for this application. It's good design because it makes my life easier. It's not selfishness. I just want your designs to be good, right? Okay. When you send the same parameter by post request for the third button, you don't pop in the images, you fill out the table. So, again, you will know that you've done the post request correctly if you get like any number of entries above 3 entries. If you try it 10 times and you never get anything above 3, you haven't done the post request correctly. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? This is not a hugely difficult assignment in my view. Most of the difficulty is fiddling with having this table generate. That's like most of it. Tables are always a pain, aren't they? Yeah. So, no questions? All good? Everybody understands? Okay. Is there anything else I want to say about this before we Oh, sorry.
Do you in like a form then, if we're submitting something?
Yeah, the form isn't actually shown in the screenshot, but it's like just at the top of the screen, button 1, button 2, button 3, and then an input. And no, it's like, it's not, these inputs should not be embedded inside of a form element. Because this is Ajax, we want all of this to happen without page reloading. Make sense? There's also a requirement to show the correct copyright information depending on like whether it's Star Wars or Nintendo, because we don't want Nintendo to smell blood in the water. Also, one further requirement for the input. Once either button 2 or button 3 has been pressed, the value in the input field becomes locked in and cannot be modified. You have to reload the page. Okay? That's also a requirement. It's all in the document. I think that's everything about assignment 5. Any further questions?
So the image that it showed is 2 different versions of the page? Like first one when
Yes.
someone press one button and the other one the table when someone press the other button, right?
These two screenshots are basically different runs
Okay.
of the program. The PHP script gives you a random selection of amiibos, right? Now this is somewhat misleading because like these two were on the previous, right? So, and I think, is this the same too, the list?
Yeah, it's the same one.
Good grief. So I'm wrong. These aren't 2 different runs because that would be literally impossible to produce. With the divs, right? That's in response to the GET request. You'll get 1, 2, or 3 records. If you get 1 record, you do 1 image centered. If you get 2 records, you do image 1, image 2 with 50%. If you get 3 images, something like this, but if this were correct and proportional. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
So when you said once you click one of the buttons to like lock in the values, that's like basically disabling the radio control then?
If you choose to use a radio control, yes. If it's like a regular text input, it like grays it out. I'm pretty sure there's like a disabled field that you can toggle. So, yeah. Sound good? Any questions? Anybody complete the assignment while I was describing it? No? You guys are working on other assignments, right?
I'm in the middle of building up the headers.
Oh, yeah? Awesome. I would say, if you know what you're doing with this one, shouldn't take you more than an hour or two, if you know your stuff. I could probably whip this off as an in-class example for you in maybe a half hour as I'm explaining it. So, yeah, something nice, light, and fluffy for the end of the semester for you. Oh, we should say what the due date is. So the due date shall be April 6th, which is the Sunday that starts the last week of class, right? So you have, assuming you don't use any late days, you have that last week assignment free. Please use it for studying for this class and the rest of your classes. Sorry, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, so just a little thing about the assignment. It's saying for the images, the div should be 100% of the screen, but if I use Bootstrap, I think it only gives you like 95%.
That's perfectly acceptable. I will accept 100%-ish. What was your question?
Oh, my question was just, because this is a thing that happens in Java, we're allowed to use our late days for this final assignment, correct?
You are permitted to use your late days for the final assignment because the due date is not the last day of class. There is an actual technical rule that we're not really permitted to have assignments due during exam week. That's like, I know that like that rule is sometimes like not followed, but it's supposed to be. So if we permitted late days to be used on something that was due like the Sunday before exam starts, you could be submitting it on the Wednesday, right? Which is like the same day you have an exam. Exam week should be for exams. So yeah, you are allowed to use your late days for this one because we managed our due dates effectively this semester. And I would like to thank all of you for not complaining too much that assignment 3 only had 1 week instead of the 2, because that has allowed us this space now. Okay? Any questions?
Just looking at the exam schedule, it says our exam is on a Wednesday, not Thursday.
Really? All right, maybe they moved it on me. Last I heard it was on a Thursday, but I'll take a look. When I get back to the office, I'll take a look. I'll publish all of the important and relevant information. Yeah, the other thing is I kind of wanted to have the discussion about what the permitted aids would be before publishing the final thing. I like to do it in one announcement, but yeah, okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, it's about a good time to have the break. Don't worry, we will certainly get through everything we have to talk about today. We really only have one thing left to talk about. So, please, return to class. Be prepared to continue class at 11:41 a.m. Thank you. We are recording. So, so we need to talk about Ajax. We have a little bit left to do. We have talked about how to send parameters by GET request. We also need to talk about how to send parameters by POST request. It's not that much more difficult than sending it by GET request. Before we do, I'd like to introduce you to a piece of software which you guys will be using, unfortunately, in server-side, well, not next semester, because next semester is the summer, but, in the fall, presuming that you have acquired enough skill in this class to pass it, which I'm sure everybody has. When I see you in server-side in the fall, we'll be using this piece of software. It's called XAMPP. So, has anybody here heard of the LAMP stack? Do you know what it stands for?
Linux.
Linux is, yep, Linux Apache.
He was either PHP or Python or one of the other ones.
PHP, Python, or Perl.
Perl, okay.
Yeah. Man, if you think PHP is a crusty old language, Perl is like the crusty old language that like PHP was the new kid on the block and beat out. So Perl is like, that's it. There you go. So XAMPP. It is the LAMP stack, but the X stands for cross-platform. So this is a program which emulates a server on your own very machine. You can connect to it, you can send packets to it, you can receive stuff from it. It is a server. The difference, I won't get into it more heavily than this because we're going to cover it again when we do server-side, but essentially the idea is your client sends HTTP packets into the, what do you call that? The ports, right? The, oh man, blanking on the name. The socket layer, that's right, thank you. So your client sends packets to the socket layer. Those sockets get stored in particular port numbers. Now, once it's in the socket layer, it has one of two options. It either goes back into the computer, or it goes out to the network, right? In the case of regular server communication, those packets hit the socket layer, pass out to the network, travel, bounce around routers and switches and all of that fancy junk we don't have to care about, hits the socket layer of the server, the machine that's running the server, gets inserted at a particular port. The server process reads that port, processes, sends something back into the socket layer, bounces around the network, comes back to your machine's socket layer, port number, the client is listening for a port number, it pulls the information in, that's how packets work, right? TCP/IP. With XAMPP, it doesn't go out onto the network. The packet hits the socket layer and then bounces back out again and hits an internal server process inside of the client machine. So it's full-blown HTTP communication. It is effective and can be used to debug programs. It is a full emulation, right? But it's also local on your own machine. So like you don't have to connect to CS Unix to do it and all of that kind of stuff, right? You don't need a physical server. So that's what XAMPP is. In theory, if you wanted to work on your assignment at a location far away from internet connection, you can use XAMPP to do it. Particularly if you take with you some of the JSON outputs that I've been referring to. So this is the XAMPP control panel. We've got Apache server. Start. That will start the Apache web server. Boop. There we go. And now you can access this from a browser tab. Localhost 1080 is the port that's generally used on lab computers. And there you have it. This is the splash screen for XAMPP. This, you could use this to help you write your assignment 5 if you don't have, like, if you can't get the VPN to work, basically. Does this make sense? Sound good? Now, there is one thing that I have to caution everybody about, though. There are some security issues with XAMPP. If we take a look at the this guy here. Anybody notice anything about the title bar here? I don't know, maybe that's too small for you to read it, but
2015.
compiled November 12th, 2015. Now, I have a theory that might be like the initial install that they set up when they did the Mohawk My Cloud Apps thing, right? Initially, right? Wouldn't surprise me. It's a little out of date. It'll still be compatible with CS Unix though. If you're going to be, if you want to install this software on your own personal computer, please make sure that you get XAMPP with PHP version 7.2.23. This is not the current version, but that is the version running on CS Unix. If you get a forward version of XAMPP and PHP, you may use things in your assignments that are not version 7 compatible. PHP changes quite a bit between versions. So please, when you are downloading XAMPP, I'll even show you where to get it, okay? So, XAMPP, there we go. You'll want to click here for other versions. All right? Even more downloads. You'll of course want to download the version that's appropriate for your operating system. You'll want XAMPP Windows. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Actually, find and replace is better. Or not replace. 7.2.23. That is the version. Get that version and no other version. Okay? That is the one that matches CS Unix. And it is actually your responsibility as a developer to make sure that you're developing for the version that you're going to be using to deploy. That is actually your responsibility, right? I know that we don't do a lot of versions and stuff so far in the program, but this is this will be the expectation of you when you are a professional working in the field. Is, if you're deploying to a server that uses PHP version 7.2.23, by gum, your development environment needs to use that same version. Okay? Am I making sense? So, within XAMPP, if you click Explorer, it will bring you to the XAMPP installation directory. The htdocs folder functions precisely similarly to your public HTML folder on your CS Unix account. It's the same thing. This is a file server, and that is the directory which is exposed to the network by the server. The network here being the internal network, right? Not the external network. Does this make sense? So if you want to test your programs, You dump them in htdocs, and then you can open them in a browser without having to double click the file, which will open it in file mode rather than HTTP mode. Make sense? Any questions? Okay, now I'm going to talk about the security problem. You see all this? See all this junk? You know what that is? Those are files that I put there last semester when I was teaching server-side programming. The XAMPP installation directory is in the root of the C drive. So basically, if I go to this PC, Windows, C drive, there's XAMPP. Here's the thing about this one, cats and kittens. All users have read-write permissions to this folder. All users. So, if you are using XAMPP on a lab computer to do your homework, and you do not take your homework with you when you go, that is to say, delete the local copy on the lab computer, that copy persists. It persists, and someone else may find it. Someone may look in the computer the next class, someone logs in, looks in the XAMPP directory, and says, "Ooh, look at that. That's a completed version of the assignment I'm working on." Our assignment. Right? And then you get hit with plagiarism, and you have no idea why. Right? So, if you are inclined, if you are a person who is not installing XAMPP on your own personal computer, or if you don't have one, if you're doing everything off of a external hard drive that you plug into the lab computers or something like that, just please make sure that you delete it before you go. Yes.
Has this actually happened?
Now, I can't, I don't know if there are any plagiarism cases that resulted from it, but basically someone yesterday, or actually it was on Tuesday, someone in class, I was showing this, and someone in class was like, "I can't get it working," and I'm like, "Okay, and I looked and I saw in the XAMPP folder, it's like, oh, that looks a lot like the assignment from last semester. And I'm just gonna delete that. Here's your computer, sir. So yeah, that's, I found out about this vulnerability by finding stuff that I shouldn't have seen in the place where I saw it. That's how I found out about it. So yeah, that's the thing that I tell everybody now when I talk about XAMPP is just don't leave files laying around on lab computers. All right? Sound good? Just be aware of it. Are you looking right now?
Yeah.
If you find anything in there, please delete it. Okay? So, and as you can see, the stuff tends to hang around for a while. This one is from, there we go, September 17th of last year. So, I'll put that on my list of things to bother people about. I just haven't had time this week because I've been putting your exam together, so. Hey, did you find something?
No.
No? Okay. Alright, okay. XAMPP is a tool you can use, right? Please be aware of it. We will be using it extensively next semester, alright? Whenever that next semester is. Any questions? Okay. Well, that being the case, let's do post requests. I'm not going to use XAMPP, although I could. I'm going to do the thing I did last time, which is to use Puppy, because I am quite an incredible nerd. Like, basically, if it's not a command line, I'm not happy. I'm only happy in command line environments. Every time I have to use a mouse, a little small part of my soul dies. You folks sitting in the back row, can you read this font?
A little bit. Thank you.
You'd like me to increase it a little bit? That might be going a bit too far. Let's try 30. Can you read this? Awesome. Logging into csunix.mohawkcollege.ca. All right. So, I'm just going to go into my public HTML directory. Now, making, winter 2025, there we go. Let's make a new directory for today, 2025-03-28. We are running out of March. We are quickly running out of March. March, soldiers. CD, there we go. Now, let's review how we go about doing a fetch request. First, we'll need an index page, index.html. I'm going to keep this one short. Here's the head. There we go. Just a little tiny HTML file, only with all we're doing is calling a script. We're just going to throw stuff in the console. Okay? I'm going to assume at this point that you guys are comfortable with reading information out of the DOM and putting it back in. Right? So, good. Here is ajax.js. So, let's remind ourselves. Now let's do the PHP script first. Changed my mind. Echo params.php. This will be a fairly simple PHP script. PHP uses period for concatenation. Words. There we go. Oh, this will need a new line. There we go. So, So I know that this is like PHP and like not for this course, but perhaps you guys are a little bit interested to see like what all of this is about. When a file has a .php file extension on an Apache server, it opens in with the PHP interpreter enabled, but you don't actually have to program PHP code. The opening PHP tag tells the server, turn on the PHP interpreter. Everything from here to when I end this tag, this is PHP code. And then it runs it as PHP instead of doing the default thing, which is this is HTML. So PHP embeds in HTML documents. All right? Echo is our print statement in PHP. Period is how concatenation is done, string concatenation. Get and post, these are called superglobals. Superglobals. Get used to that joke. If you have me anyway. The superglobals are where your incoming get and post parameters are stored for use by the program. This is a fairly dangerous thing to do, as get and post parameters can contain malicious code. So in this case, we are not filtering things the way we should be, but that's because this is a small toy example for a JavaScript class, and when we do server-side, I'll teach you how to do it properly. Okay? But you might be wondering why I'm calling a function called JSON encode on these superglobals before I send them back to the client. And the answer is, the way that things print, the way things string convert in PHP is a little strange a lot of the time. Like, for example, how would you think that true, the Boolean value true, how do you think that string converts in PHP? This was an exam question for PHP, actually.
0, 1, something like that.
1.
Oh, so
Yeah,
1,
so-
0, something like that?
Nope, just 1. So the Boolean value true string converts as the number 1 in PHP. Does anybody want to guess what false prints as?
No. False
0?
0.
Empty string.
Oh.
That was a good reaction. Right? Yeah. You should recoil in disgust when I say that, right?
I mean, what, like, does PHP doesn't have 0? Or it has 0, it just refuses to give 0 as default answer. Just refuse to give 0.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the closest I can think of to why it does this is like, it's actually true if you go into a low enough level language that true and false don't exist. Like, this is an interesting point about true and false. In C, the C programming language, there wasn't any way of doing a Boolean variable until 1999. C was made in the 60s. So one asks oneself, what were they doing for Booleans from the 60s until right before the turn of the millennium? And the answer was, 0 is false, anything that's not 0 is true. This also just happens to be how the CPU processes binaries, or processes Booleans. So like this is mapped onto how the CPU behaves, right? But non-zero is true, 0 is false. So okay, all right, we can work with that. It still doesn't explain why false doesn't convert to 0, right? Well, is this character equal to 0? What's the character code for 0?
1 is not, the character 1 is not equal to 1 here.
Yeah, but it's also, true is just defined as non-zero, so you can pick an
Okay.
arbitrary value.
Like, it can be anything.
Right,
Yeah, it's
So-
a representation, right?
yeah, but no, this is like a code, it's like 62 or something, right, in ASCII. So, what is 0 in ASCII? Anybody know what that thing is? Frozen yogurt, what?
A person waving.
A person waving? A little bit, yeah. No, this is the null character.
No, okay.
Yeah, so the null character has a very special and important purpose in strings. From like, at the level of the C standard library, which is the way things are done, right? All strings are defined as having the null character as their last character, right? So if you say, hello, you actually aren't saying hello, you are saying hello, null character. That is the last character in everything you allocate. So if you're in a language like C, where you have to actually explicitly allocate memory for your string, if you say, oh, well, this is a 5-character string, I'm going to give it 5 characters, your program crashes. Your program crashes because the C standard library functions use this thing to tell when a string has stopped. Do you want to know why it's necessary to put a null character in to tell if a string has stopped? I'm going to tell you anyways, but you can nod your heads if you want. No? There we go, thank you. It's because C has no bounds checking on arrays. None. If you have an array in C, right, let's say you have int array x, is equal to 1, 2, 3, right? In every other language, in every modern language, if you try to access element number 3, right? Elements 0, 1, and 2, if you try to say x at 3, you will get what?
Outbound error, right?
That's right, you'll get an out of bounds exception or something that resembles it, right? Not in C. You don't want to know what C does?
It's gonna give you a null value or something like that, right?
Not a null value. It will just read the next data cell.
And it's empty.
So that's your memory overflow.
This is your buffer overflow attack.
Oh,
Yeah.
but that's
It literally will just read the next memory cell. You are responsible in C for making sure that your memory does not exceed the bounds of the arrays that you've declared.
but in that case, what the system will return to you?
Depends on what's in that memory cell.
Okay.
A lot of the time it's 0, because a lot of memory is 0 a lot of the time. But, if, let's say you're not just reading one past the end, right? You just keep going, right? You are reading things like your other arrays. You are reading things like your other variable values. You are reading memory that was set by previous processes that used the same memory a lot of the time. If you read far enough, the operating system shuts you down and says, stop! You have read too much memory. The operating systems said, this is the way that operating systems, this is one of the things that became necessary for operating systems. It's like, you have this much memory. If you step outside of your sandbox, I'm going to kill you. And that's called a segmentation fault. So when you are programming in C, segmentation faults happen quite a lot if you don't know what you're doing, because you will try to read memory that's outside of the bounds of the memory the CPU gave you. It will crash your program, and occasionally your operating system. Not often anymore with the operating system, but occasionally. And it makes sense because if you could just read outside of the bounds of your little memory sandbox, you could easily read, all the first couple of kilobytes of your memory, which is where the operating system puts all of its stuff, right? It makes sense to segment memory like this. Segmentation faults are they are actually helpful, right? You shouldn't be able to overwrite memory being used by the operating system from any task, right? But that's why, right? So what the null character is here to do is it's to say, okay, so you want a function that reads the length of a string. That's fine. There's nothing about the string itself in memory that tells me how long it is. Unless there's a character, an actual physical character sitting there telling you how long the string is. So that's why. So anytime you use the null string or the empty string, it's not actually empty, guys. It's not actually empty. It's got the null character in there. All right? So that's why. That's why false prints as
empty and string.
yeah, because the null character's ASCII value is 0. So there you go. But we should probably do Ajax.
Yeah.
If we have time, though, I'll explain to you. Okay, bonus. Let's get through Ajax, because then I'll tell you why you should never, ever, 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 ever do exact equality comparison with floating point numbers. Okay. All right. Ajax post request. You start by fetching the resource. We call this echo, what do we call it? Echo params. .php. A thing which is necessary, which I did not include in a previous lesson, if you're doing this on a server which enforces permissions, which is hopefully any server you ever work on, you will need to include credentials included. So all of this business with sending post requests is entirely reliant on the second parameter of the fetch function. This guy. You create an object and you provide a bunch of values, and that sets up your post request. All right? So, in our case, we can still set up the query string the same way. It's just we do not attach it to the script that, like the name of the script that we are seeking. All right? So we can say let params equal name equal question mark name equals Nick and hobby equals being a know-it-all. There we go. No. Gardening. So to send the GET request, we did this. Right? To send this information by GET request, we attached the parameters here. This is incorrect for a POST request. This information is public. If you are sending things, like if you are intending to send a POST parameter, you are intending it to be private. If you send it publicly, you're not sending it privately. Therefore, it's wrong. It's wrong to attach POST parameters here. Does that make sense? You can actually attach both, right? To one HTTP request, you can attach both POST parameters and GET parameters. But generally speaking, only one of the two of those is done for any particular packet. right? So, you don't, well, let's just leave this one, and then I'll show you the post in contrast to it. Then, response.text, then data gets console.log data. There we go. If we load up our web page, csunix.mohawkcollege.ca. There we go. Inspect, console, there you go. Get parameters, name, Nick, Bobby, Gardner. Okay? Get request. Now let's modify this to do the post request. Doing the post request essentially means doing a bunch of additional options. There we go. First, we detach the parameters from the URL. Next, we need to include more options. The most obvious additional option that we need to send is the method type itself. Method is, you guessed it, post. Now, just for your awareness, this is a JavaScript object. The ordering of the things inside of it does not matter. You may provide the options in any order you please, so long as you provide all of them. Okay? So, for this, I strongly recommend looking up in the notes what all of the correct options are. Personally, I've never managed to memorize it myself, and I wouldn't expect you folks to. There we go. So, the next one well, let's do this one next. Body gets parameters. So, the query string we are attaching to the request using the body field. Body gets params. Now, it's important to note, it's actually optional to make these strings in JavaScript. You can leave the quotes off if you want. I'm leaving them on, I'm not even sure why. But this one definitely should not have quotes because that is a reference to the variable up here, right? If you put it in quotes, it'll just literally say params. Make sense? So far so good? Hopefully this isn't, that none of these are earth-shattering revelations like that business about, strings in C that we had just a few moments ago. Next, because we are attaching the parameters to the body, we need to inform the server how they've been encoded, right? So it's headers content dash type. Is that capitalized? Yes, it is. Maybe I'll just pull this one down a bit so that it can fit it all on one line. It's a bit long. Application/xwww form URL encoded. This is the MIME type for the query parameter format that we've been using for get parameters. All we need to do is copy pasta that string into our code, assuming that we're sending via parameters in the way that we've been sending it. So, application /x-www- forms-URL encoded. Yes. And that is all that's required. Shall we see if it works? Oh, syntax error. Surely you jest. Line 3. Invalid or unexpected token. Oh! Ha! Silly me. Using the wrong comment character. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. There we go. Now, you can see we are receiving 2 responses from the PHP script. 1, we have received our post parameters. 2, we have received and echoed our get parameters. However, is there anything you notice about this? Is there anything you will notice about the ordering of these 2 messages?
First, that postman, the post requests are written first, then the get request.
That's right. Is that the order we sent the requests in? It's not. So here we are receiving the post material before the get material. But if we take a look at our code, we are sending the get request before the post request. What gives? They are asynchronous functions. The amount of time that it takes the get and the post request to make it through the network is not fixed. Just because you send AJAX requests in a particular order does not mean that they return to you in that order. They are asynchronous. And as a matter of fact, if we reload the page a few times, most of the time the post packet makes it back faster, but every once in a while, oh, you saw it? Yeah. Sometimes, like most of the time the post packet is making it back before the get packet, but occasionally that's flipped. So this actually tells us something about like the network. Seems to be like generally prioritizing post messages for some reason. Now, like it's important to understand that this is an artifact of the network and not the server, right? The server will be processing these packets in the order it receives them, right? But the amount of time it takes the packet to travel through the network, that will differ every time. Although according to this research that we've just done, post parameters seem to be favored, or post requests seem to be favored in terms of time through the network. Does that make sense? So, I'm just trying to reinforce the point. If you don't expect it to get through the network like in the order you send them, right? Just because you put a just because you put a fetch request in doesn't mean it finishes that thing before it goes to the next one. This is asynchronous programming. Okay? Any questions? You now know everything you need to know to do assignment 5. I will say the source of the most common error on assignment 5 is failing to attach these parameters here, here instead of there. Like, even if your method says post, if you have attached parameters here, it will be treated as a GET request, even if the method type is wrong. So, if you are sending your parameters by GET in a POST request, that counts as a GET request, and the third button is supposed to do a POST request, not a GET request. That's the place where most people lose their marks on assignment 5. Does that make sense? Otherwise, the assignment is fairly facile. Any questions? Any questions about anything at all? Any philosophical questions?
So do we have to write some PHP for like the HTML that we're gonna?
Hell no. Not until server-side next semester. You are not required to know any PHP for the exam. You are not required to write any PHP for the assignment. But it's kind of interesting. This course used to be client-side and server-side all smushed together in one semester. A few years ago, they split the course into client-side and server-side. So, like, this is your bridge topic from one to the other. There's a reason that I'm showing you PHP. It's because you should understand that in this type of communication, PHP forms the other half of it, right? So that's why I'm showing you PHP now. It's more for like big picture stuff, if that makes sense. Any questions? Okay. Well, we have a little bit of time. Would you like to know why you should never ever use exact equality comparison on floating point numbers?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm going to show you this in Python, just because it's kind of slightly easier to pull up the interpreter, but this works in any language. All right, you ready?
Oh,
Ready for this?
I realized I did something really regarding the blog. After it does.
All right.
I myself realizing that I did something wrong.
This is like my, when I need to do a Python interpreter quickly, this is how I do it. All right. You guys can read this from the back? You can see what I'm doing? A little bigger? Better? Cool. So, let me ask you a question. What is 0.1 plus 0.1? Right? What about 3 of them?
I ran into that problem during the JavaScript.
Yeah, I was thinking
I had
about that.
a trunk table.
Yeah.
For the video game, I was doing
Actually-
something like that, and of course it. Sorry.
So this is the error accumulating, right? I think you can do it with like 0.1 plus 0.2 as well. Yeah. So there are math reasons for this. There are math reasons for this. Are you guys ready for some math? Possibly not. I'm going to do it anyway. All right. So it all comes down to the way numbers work, right? So when we represent the number 0.1, what is the base system that this number is represented in?
10.
Base 10. So base 10, right? What's the base in binary? 2. Right? So here's how numbers work. You can only get an exact representation of a number using something like a decimal point if the following is true. This number must be equal to some number x over 10 to the power of some number y. Right? So in the example of this, that would be 1 over 10. So x is 1, y is also 1. Right? If I had a slightly more complicated number, 0.238, that is 238 over 1,000, which is 238 over 10 to the power of 3. Right? So the question is, if we are converting between base systems, well, now let me back up a little bit. This is true of finite decimals, right? What happens if you enter 1 divided by 3? What do you get? You get infinitely repeating 3's, right? 1 over 3 is equal to 0.33333, etc. Right? Forever. Why? That's not a power of 10. Nor can it ever be represented as a power of 10. Right? Because that be a prime number r. Right? Because this is a prime number, and it's not one of the prime factors of 10, it can't be done. Right? So, like, multiply it by 10, right? You get 10 over 30. Same problem. This is not a power of 10. So, 1/3 does not have finite, it cannot be represented with a finite number of numbers in decimal. Right? Okay. Now let's apply that to binary. How might we represent How might we represent 0.1 in terms of binary arithmetic? We are looking for some x over 2 to the power of y, which represents that number. Right? So let's try a few. What if, let's try by increasing the value of 2, right? With just sort of x over 2, you've really only got two options, 1 and 0, right? So the closest you can come to is 0 over 2, right? 0 is not a great approximation of 0.1, right? But it's closer than 0.5. Add another one, x over 4. We can get closer to 0.1 by saying 1 over 4, right? Well, actually, I think 0 is still closer, right? Right? X over 8. What's 1 over 8? Anybody?
0.125.
Yeah. That's 0.125. Right? So the more digits we provide here, the closer an approximation we get to 0.1. But the problem is, there's no way to represent 1 over 10 as x over 2 to the y. Why? Because 10 breaks down into 5 times 2. It's got 2 prime factors, 5, 2. The 2 is okay. 2 is great. If it were just prime factors of the same number, it would be fine, right? Like, for example, if the number we were trying to represent were like, 15 over 16, we can do that in binary with finite precision, right? Or we can do that with exact precision, because this thing can be represented by that formula. But because this thing contains a 5, there's no power of 2 that will equal 5, right? So no amount of multiplication will get you there, right? So, in order to represent 0.1 in binary arithmetic with exact precision, you require an infinite number of binary digits, right? In the same way that if we wanted to represent 1/3 in the decimal system with exact precision, we would need an infinite number of 3s. The same is true in the binary system for numbers like 0.1. Does that make sense? So we would require an infinite number of bits. Do we have an infinite number of bits? No. Computers are finite machines, right? In fact, for the longest time, the number of bits that you got for a floating point number was 32. This is how float is defined. 64 is how double is defined. Did they tell you what double stands for? Come on, did they? What is it?
Double line.
It's actually double precision floating point number. That's what double stands for. So, and the reason it's called double precision is, as we've just demonstrated, the more bits you smack into the number, the more precise the number becomes, right? The more precision that you can represent a number with less deviation from the true number, right? So, at this level, this buys you about 15 decimal digits of precision, right? 64 bits equates to about 15 decimal places of precision for a number, right? You can trick representations using the trick that I just showed you in Python. You can trick the representations by accumulating the error using subsequent operations, right? But, it's very, 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 very important to understand when you're working with floating point numbers, you are always, 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 well, almost always, working with a near approximation of the number you think it is, and not the actual number itself. This is why exact equality comparison generally doesn't work on floating point numbers,
Makes sense now.
right? Yeah. So let me show you an actual example. And this isn't Python's fault. This is how the CPU works, right? This is hardware. Every programming language has this.
No, because I think one of the problems I had with assignment 4 was because of this.
Yeah, I'm honestly shocked that this doesn't appear in the curriculum anywhere, because I consider this to be essential knowledge. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's say you've added 0.1 together 10 times. It gives us 0.9999999, etc. If you take 0.1, add it to itself 10 times, you multiply it by 10, it doesn't equal 1. But it does work with multiplication. Not addition, but it does work with multiplication. So basically, you should view this thing as being inherently unreliable when it's applied to floating point numbers. You should not bother yourself trying to predict when it's going to work and when it's not. Just assume it's not going to work and your life will be easier. So you might be asking yourself, but that seems like a necessary thing to have to do. Let me show you how to actually do equality comparison with floats. You ready for this? You take the two numbers, come on. There we go. You take the two numbers, you subtract them. That's a very small number. And you say that. Take the absolute value of that. You guys know what absolute value is?
Like positive value.
Yeah, if it's negative, turn it positive. If it's positive, leave it alone. Yeah. Then you test to see if that's smaller than some very small number. And that's how you do equality comparison with floating point numbers.
I'm gonna take the that.
Yes, please do. The number of time, oh man, the amount of time the human race has spent spinning its wheels on that problem, you know? But it's just the math. There's no way around it, you know? But yeah. So there you go. That's why you don't use exact equality comparison on floating point
I
numbers.
can do it.
Yeah.
Completely easy.
Right? Now, before we go though, I'll just show you one more thing, I think. Oh, do I remember how to do this? Python. There we go. I got there in the end. So the format function can be used to modify how numbers are printed. So this thing that was previously being reported as 999,999,999, those nines actually only go up to that's what you were seeing before. This is the tail that it leaves off, right? And you can see that around the ends of this, it does end in a 5, even in a 7-5, which looks suspiciously base 2, right? So, yeah, so that's how that number is actually represented. If you want, you can, you can subtract one, see what it looks like. See how the number changes as you get closer. So, long story short, every floating point number should be assumed to be a very close approximation of the real number and not the real number itself. And you don't know how far away it is from the real number. These errors can build up like over time as well. If you have a program running for like days, right, that's doing a lot of additions of in this manner, like floating point error can expand over time and become an actual problem, right? But in general, you know, like milli, micro, nano, atto, femto, right? In terms of like, if you're trying to map these numbers onto like actual physical phenomena, it's like at least 4 or 5 orders of magnitude smaller than the smallest thing we know to exist, right? So, like in terms of numeric representations, it's probably good enough, right? But you should be aware, as programmers, don't ever use equality comparison with floats. Okay? Promise me? Promise? Everybody promise?
From now on, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'll see you guys next week. We will do review. Bring questions. Bring problems for me to solve. I also will do live coding for you.